Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to talk about episode 2 of Masked Singer season 3. Ultimately, kind of today, I had, kind of in the last couple days, I kind of have been marinating on some stuff. Kind of bringing together not only my own guesses, which a lot of the times were honestly quite frequently shots in the dark. Now I'm also kind of making more moves, making more assumptions, and then also kind of verifying things through eventual clues that we get a little bit more of these characters. Ultimately, there might have been a time or two that I had looked through to ultimately see what also the internet had thought. Maybe the internet had assumed some characters that I have verifiable reasons for why that these people could ultimately be these characters. Because ultimately, I kind of go out of my way to really put in some real legitimate legwork instead of just going like, yeah, give me the right answer and like that'll be my answer. No, I'm actually going to put forth some legwork to actually really see if somebody who guesses something is something that I can consent to as well. Um and what have you. So ultimately, there were five on tonight. By the end of this episode, I'm gonna let you know who exactly got eliminated and who they were unmasked. Um, but I guess I can tell you who got eliminated, but I won't actually tell you who that person actually is until the very end of the video. You're gonna double five spoil count and whatever. With this being episode 2, I guess I can go on a actual review now of the show so far and how well or poorly I have been doing. Ultimately, again, hand to all that's whatever. I am gonna be honest, and if I did lose, I lose. If I won, I won. There might be some stuff where I might have to ultimately tell you was a last ditch decision or where I came up with this answer or this and that. But I am not trying to rig this in any form of fashion or whatever. Ultimately, this takes days to come up with a different answer or to come up with something that sounds more reasonable in time in my mind. Anyways, especially tonight, kind of the clues did really help much more this episode than they probably had in the other one. But also there were kind of stuff that did stick out a little bit more in this episode than they did in past. So, I'm going to tell you who I feel may now be may be these characters, but ultimately, there's some times where, again, there might be an internet decision out there, somebody commenting on one of the videos that I do, or ultimately, I might just be Googling accidentally myself just because I'm looking for photos of the Masked Singer and I get plopped with this picture of so and so actress next to so and so monster, and I'm just like, well, that's interesting. And then I kind of research, look it up, and whatever and what have you, and I'm like, yeah, that actually does make sense. Maybe I should consent that this is my answer. But ultimately, that's before the show actually airs, or before I actually get to see it. Um, Anyways, because a lot of people could say that I'm rigging things or whatever. If I go out of my way to thoroughly justify this person to you, why would I go out of my way to rig said answer and whatever and what have you? Anyways, so this time around, considering this is just kind of the second coming of these characters, I'm just gonna kind of go through every one of these pictures and maybe see if anything had differed. This time around, I'm not gonna kind of go out of my way to individually do these. I'm just gonna kind of do them in bulk because I've kind of already talked about these characters and this and that. So let's go now and give you kind of my consensus of who I now think a lot of these characters are, because a lot of decisions had been made during the last couple days. A lot of changes have been made to my decisions. A lot of answers have been changed because ultimately I did a little bit more research, or there was kind of a lot of clues that kind of stuck out as like one of a kind like things. So let's go and let's talk about Miss Monster. If you or yeah, Miss Monster, if you guys had seen my very first episode of season 3 episode 1, I had mentioned that I felt like Miss Monster honestly could be Shaka Khan. I'm honestly coming closer to that decision now. That it could quite possibly be Deanna Warwick, or it could be Shaka Khan. Ultimately, I don't know what any of the clues could really relate that it could be Shaka Khan. But ultimately, just I go via the sound. Let's go with Kangaroo. Really, for the Kangaroo, I have no effing clue who this character is. More than likely, I think I said Chris Brown, which sounded like an obscure answer because I have no clue. Evidently, the internet is telling people that Robin Woods is the Kangaroo. So ultimately, I guess I can ultimately submit that it could be either Chris Brown for some bizarre reason, or it's the internet answer, Robin Woods, who I'm not familiar with at all. I don't know who she is. But evidently, the internet is saying this person, so I guess it's this person. If people know Robin Woods, if people are familiar with her work or whatever she does, let me know how she's related to anybody, because I don't know who she is at all. I didn't care to research her because I honestly is just like, okay, I don't know who this person is, and I don't want to take the time to actually research this person. So moving on. Recently, Rob Bronstenkowski, if I said that, I'm gonna butcher that name. Gronk. Gronk. Anyways, I had said in the last episode that I kind of assumed that White Tiger was either Jason David Frank or maybe Jason Momoa. I'm kind of leaning towards more of Rob. Why? Because ultimately, I had seen an episode of Drop the Mic where Rob had done a rap battle. And ultimately, it seems like in this episode twice now, the White Tiger has been rapping. So if you kind of want to get it, like, if you want to watch the episode of Rob doing Drop the Mic and then listen to the White Tiger, it sounds very similar, almost the same. Reasonably, with the clues for today, really, I kind of could get more of a consensus of it being Rob, because ultimately that he said something about being on the mat for a friend, which ultimately meant Rob has, if he's ever alluded that he's been a Pro Bowl, like a Super Bowl guy, he's been in a Super Bowl. Rob has also been in a Royal Rumble match for WWE. He entered in a Royal Rumble match, or like he was like in some kind of battle Royal Rumble match thing for either WrestleMania or I think it was like a WrestleMania like battle royal. He was in like the Andre the Giant battle royal, I think, or something like that. Um, to help out his wrestler friend Mojo Rawley, who used to be a football player as well. They're really good friends and whatever and what have you. So ultimately, that's kind of where that clue came into in fruition. But yeah, I think I'm kind of really cementing that it could be much more Rob than anybody else, and I think especially in this episode, the judges were going that way. So yeah, that's where I was kind of heading towards now too, because I'm just like, I have no clue who this person is. Now that I've kind of heard them, now that I've kind of done my research, luckily this person wasn't eliminated right out of the way. It seemed like the easiest person that I could figure out. Luckily, in the first episode, was luckily the person that went home the quickest, and luckily for me. So the clues really helped me out for the llama, because ultimately the llama had an accordion. There's only so many people that are famous for playing an accordion somewhere. That kind of really does narrow it down. Ultimately, to hear a comedian, I'm like, okay, so this has to be a comedian, and it's not Weird Al Yankovic, which is Weird Al Yankovic is known for playing the accordion, famously so. So, like, kind of racking my brain on who I thought could possibly be a famous accordion playing person kind of led me to um, remembering that Drew Carey used to sing on his show, on his own sitcom. And looking back at that, Drew Carey has a performance of him singing with an accordion. So ultimately, I'm just kind of like, okay, my first guess of the llama was a blatant shot in the dark. But ultimately, I was just like, well, maybe it's that character still. But ultimately, kind of tonight, kind of like, I don't think Eugenio Dertez uh, plays the accordion. But luckily for me, like, I kind of narrowed it down to like, okay, there's only a very small faction of people that play the accordion and are singers and are celebrities and are whatever. So, like, it kind of was easy to narrow it down that way. Yeah, so ultimately, kind of all the other clues were very misleading. Were very just like, I don't understand what any of those things are. But the accordion thing kind of easily helped me narrow down my search engine to like famous accordion playing actors or whatever, and that quickly narrows down the search. And recently, watched like I had watched like the Drew Carey show heavily when I was younger. Like, I always would remember it being like this show that like it was always very repetitive. It like if like the show would always like be the same show every week. Like, yeah, there'd be some huge cliffhanging story, but then it would just go like towards like the last 10 seconds of the show, everything would just be fine and back to normal, and like that's how the show went. So ultimately, I know there was maybe a people here and there that were maybe saying like Danny Bottaducci, which I'm like, I don't know. I've rarely ever like the only time that Danny actually sang was when he was like a child, and I don't think like he's gonna go out of his way to start singing now. Um, like, he has done some performances with David Cassidy, but like, and of course him being a performer when he was much younger and this and that. Anyways, like, kind of Drew Carey was kind of my like, okay, like, I remember Drew doing accordions on a show, so I'm like, okay, sounds like him. So there we go. If anything, Jesse McCartney, which kind of really for the states, like for me, like he was probably only a one hit wonder. The only song that people might know him from how quickly he left the limelight, people might remember Jesse McCartney from a song called Beautiful Soul. That's the only probably recognizable song that I could think of that and it sounded like that, like this is kind of like the internet answer too, but I kind of took it along and just like, okay, well, I remember this guy from doing this beautiful soul song. I don't wanna dig, I don't wanna hope, blah 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 blah. There might be copyright issues, so whatever. Yeah. So this song or this turtle, I guess I can consent. It's either Joey McIntyre or it could be another New Kids on the Block member, maybe Jordan Knight. Because Jordan Knight does get very high and all over the place with his register. So it also could be a New Kids on the Block member, Jordan Knight, is what I could consent that it could be the turtle. But also as well, I could also think it's Jesse McCartney. So yeah. So I've kind of really kind of went through the gambit of who I ultimately thought all these people were. Um, or kind of going back to old answers, and this and that. Like all of these ones here aren't clearly 100% cemented yet, because I had other answers from previous episodes. But ultimately, um, I think Rob is like a much better answer right now. I assume that because ultimately you're gonna know who it is by the end of this video, who the llama actually was. Um, Jesse McCartney, yeah, like I guess kind of like spamming through like one hit wonders and whatever. Because like to me, like ultimately, like yeah, he had stuff that came after that. Like he's even been performing since last year. Like he's still at it. He's still putting stuff out there. I only just know him from one song. Shaka Khan, I've known her. I've always guessed her to be people for the longest effing time. And Robin Woods, I don't know who this person is. Maybe somebody who's more in the know than I do will let me know about this person. So now, thankfully enough, I have had the ability to be able um, to kind of guess these people. And now, luckily enough, I now have a week to be able to marinate more on these characters, luckily enough. So now, if you guys have any better guesses of any of these people, or a lot of people might rag on me because I might have looked into like if people had consented that this is a internet answer and whatever and what have you, and like, oh yeah, you're going with the internet answer, or you're cheating, or you're whatever. Again, ultimately, I'm probably actually justifying a lot of stuff that maybe other people would. A lot of people would just be like, yeah, like clearly it's for this person now because the judges said so, and they're not really fact checking. They're not really like thinking of like what is the real legitimate reason for why they're going with things. I try to rationalize and justify everything to you of why I had this churning in my mind. So the llama had went home tonight. Ultimately, I just think that his performance, like between the llama and the white tiger, I think were really the two that were just kind of like on the chopping block, because ultimately, like they just don't really sound, they just don't really sound that like great. They just don't sound that great. I think kind of what wins people over for White Tiger is just his performance. Like he's a showman. He's not a actual singer of any kind. So ultimately, even though he has had times where he had sung on commercials and stuff like that, still it's just like he's a rapper. Like that's all they can really do. So, yeah, we're gonna showcase now who the llama was, so I don't have to take too long of this video. So I'm gonna give you a double five, and so if you don't want to know who the llama was, then you can turn off at this point. But ultimately, I'm going to reveal who the llama was, and then ultimately I'm going to talk about the season as a whole, and if I've won, done well so far, or just am just maintaining what I'm doing so far. So now I'm going to give you a double five count, and then we're going to reveal who the llama was. So, yeah, if you guys like, I've like, I just find it interesting, like all the stuff that eventually I can like research, figure out, and actually see if luckily I'm correct. But we have other groups to go into, and stuff like that. We have like B's and C's and groups like that, and we're gonna have like a tier bracket, which I'm gonna show at the end of this video, of what all the other characters will look like, because we haven't really seen all the characters that look like uh people on the show and whatever the F. So now, spoiler time. Spoiler time. I'm going to tell you who the llama is because it's that time. So now, if you guys don't want to know who the llama is, or you already know and you just want to go, I'm going to show you this now. So be prepared, because dare say it's going to happen. Drew Carey, comedian, actor, and game show host, was the llama. Reasonably, I was actually really excited about this, because ultimately I'm just I really didn't understand that it was Drew Carey, because I was thinking, I'm like, well, like he's probably really busy on Price is Right. Why would ultimately he be on here? But ultimately there was just something undeniable about me, and I think they really threw a lot of people off simply because he says that he's in Seattle. Everybody knows him from Cleveland, Ohio. But ultimately, a lot of people had said that it's like, well, Drew does work in Seattle. Like, he works at a radio station or whatever in Seattle. Like, he works in Seattle. Ultimately, the accordion thing really did stick out for me. Because I was like, okay, like I remember the Drew Carey show. I remember him playing an accordion, and that's kind of what in there. So I don't know. I guess luckily enough for me, I'd watched that show. Otherwise, I would have never have known that this was questionably Drew Carey. Um, because ultimately, like the bizarrish knowledge that I have, really shows, really shows through most of these episodes of just the bizarrish things that I just take from, and I'm just like, okay, sounds like okay, now I can justify this because research, because I actually do my research, unlike a lot of other people that just quickly consent to things and what have you. Anyways, God, this is we like basically with my guesses, like we're starting out the show really good. I wish that I would have come up with some answers a lot quicker, but again, that's when like you can take some days to really marinate on things. I think is what is really great. And then there's also a community that will downright say that it's like, well, yeah, these answers are stupid, or these answers don't make any sense. And then like it's like, well, what's your answer? And it's just like, well, I think it might be this person, or it might be like George Clooney, or it might be some random person that somebody says, and then you're just looking and you're just like, well, yeah, maybe there is something about this that does actually make sense. Like I think Wayne Brady was kind of one of those where ultimately I I had to grow into like going, well, yeah, like it does sound like Wayne Brady could be this character, and I could really the longer I was with that hearing this character, I was like, yeah, like it does sound like Wayne finally for freaking once. Because Wayne was trying to be like other people. Um, where I think like for Drew, I was just like, God, why does this voice sound so familiar? because I've heard him sing in past. Um, but I was like, God, why does this voice sound so familiar? It was really like an axe to grind, just like, why does this voice sound so familiar? And I was just kind of pulling all kinds of strings, figuring out who this person was. So, now that we know that Drew Carey is the Llama, now that I have the first two characters under my belt, basically the next two shows that come after this, really do not matter. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Um, but at least I'm batting more than, like, I'm batting 1,000 right now, and so if I get one wrong or one incorrect, it's not a big deal. But again, we're at least going to have a week now to really marinate on all these people, and on top of that, like, we're going to really have some time to really cement that, like, these people are who they are. And ultimately, people might have different answers, which is perfectly fine. Um, but in time, maybe a lot of people might consent that I am closer to being correct or closer to being wrong, and hence why that's what the comment system's for. Just like, oh no, like I think it's this. Like, the only thing that really does suck about this season is there's a very small people to pick from. Like, I kind of liked how we had like, instead of like this stupid tier system, I actually liked when you would get a rotation of people, because then like I enjoyed that aspect. I enjoyed the aspect of just like having a rotation of characters and whatever. It's much more exciting. Ultimately, people might just maybe not watch every single episode, because every episode is basically going to be the same. Once they can consent on the very first premiere episode who everyone is, it kind of becomes pointless to watch after that. It's like, oh yeah, of course that's Rob Gronkowski. I don't need to see this. This is Drew Carey. I don't need to see this. This is Lil Wayne. This is Shaka Khan. This is this character. This is that character. Once they kind of in the premiere episode can quickly consent who everyone is, then it just gets to the point where they don't need to see the episodes. They're just going to watch the reveals, because reasonably then they're like, oh yeah, I already knew in the very first episode who all these people were. Um, yeah. So it's like basically, yeah, like I think people might drop off on this season just because of how it's done. I like the rotation of people. Um, yeah, it just kind of sucks that it's just kind of like, okay, like, so these people are going to have seemingly way less time on the show. Um, I don't get why the way that they're doing this season, but we just have to kind of just deal with it, because it's ultimately I hope that they kind of change their ways or realize that, like, no, people thought that this is goofy, and like, and we've lost a lot of viewership because like people are just kind of like, we're seeing the same show every week. So that'll maybe factor in on what they do next season and this and that. Because I don't think a lot of people like this tier system. This kind of like one rung of people that you're gonna see every single, like, for a month, and then you're gonna get a whole new group of people that, if you quickly can figure out who they all are, basically renders like the next month like pointless to watch, and so on and so forth. Anyways, so speaking of which, let's talk about like the scorecard. Last week, I had luckily quickly had decided that it was Lil Wayne. And ultimately, I think a lot of people might have consented to that as well because of the sound of Lil Wayne. But not everyone. A lot of people were didn't think it was Lil Wayne at all. The show was kind of like, oh my god, big whatever. biggest celebrity ever on the show. Anyways, the thing that I thought was funny about this is really how absurdly like far that these judges are from guessing who people are. It really seems like I don't know where they're getting their guesses from. I do not under it seems like a lot of the guesses that they're going with are stuff that they guessed from previous seasons and now they're just going into this season. It's like, I guess it's just that person. It's like a lot of the guesses honestly do not make a rational amount of sense. They don't. A lot of the guesses are just like throwing like taking 30 celebrities and just throwing a dart at a dartboard and then just going, I guess it's that person. But maybe they just didn't have time to really guess who these people were. So I guess we can really give them the benefit of the doubt that like they didn't have like a week or whatever to marinate on who these people were or however long that they shoot this or whatever when they shoot this beforehand, this and that and whatever and what have you. Anyways, so like they might not really have enough time to really consent to all these people were because they quickly shoot all these things. But you would think that like if even for me, like I would make a super quick consensus within days and kind of come into a more rational like answer, because I had time to marinate on who these people were, and ultimately I could have been right so far. But there is so much undefined right now. There's so many goofy and much more interesting characters to see. I'm honestly much more interested in Group B than I am, or Group C than I actually am Group A. Kind of a lot of the characters in Group A, character wise, just aren't that interesting looking. Kind of Group B really does have a lot more to go on and what have you. Like Group C, like all of those characters look really absurd, and I can't wait till Group C. Hence why I think it's stupid to just like take out an entire team. There should be a rotation. Clearly, um, if anything, supposedly I guess some internet clues of people going into some characters. Reasonably, right now, the only clue that seems that people are guessing right now is that the mouse could be Paris Hilton, which I guess I could probably. I haven't heard the mouse sing or whatever. So I guess if people know much more about Paris Hilton, maybe they can really consent that the mouse is Paris Hilton. But ultimately, like I'm just like whatever. Like I don't like I we haven't been to that group yet. We haven't heard these people perform yet, and yeah, it is kind of funny that they do have like a swan in Group C. I think maybe because of consistent times where Ken had mentioned about Bjork. Bjork had been famously known for like wearing like a swan at some like MTV Video Music Award thing. So maybe that's why they chose to do a swan maybe in the season because of how many numerous times that Ken had mentioned Bjork. But yeah, I don't know. Like either that or maybe there's some kind of other reason for a swan being put into this. But I'm really loving the costumes. Man, it does seem like every single one of these characters, they really put a lot of money into the costumes. Every once in a while, you would see a bunch of or you'd see a costume here and there, like three or four of them. Where I'm like, God, these costumes look so effing cheap, and I don't like that at all. But it seems like now, since the Masked Singer is really a global phenomena, it does really seem like they're really putting forth the money and effort into these shows because it's coming out to be very much global phenomena. Like looking at the Masked Singer UK, like wow, those costumes are really awesome. I really liked all those costumes that were showcased in the Masked Singer UK. Anyways, yeah, it's I'm like it's great to see that we're really going and giving this a worldly appeal, and I feel good about my guesses now, where I was very much unsure about a lot of things. But ultimately, there might be a character here and there that ultimately I'm assuming could be a loss, but I really just don't care because ultimately, like, if I can eventually come up with a last minute guess, or I can come up with a last minute researching fact mission of like, okay, from this clue I'm gonna take this clue and just go, okay, like, all right, I can take this clue and I can figure out who this is, narrow down a Google search, and come to some different consensus. Anyways, yeah, I don't know why that like the turtle Zac Efron. Sure, right, okay. Um, yeah. The kangaroo, we don't know. But if that goes down as a loss, I really don't care. Because ultimately, like, if I can get four other characters correct and that one wrong, we're still above 500 for guesses. So, and there's so much more show to do. There's 12 more other people to go and get through. So, I'm ultimately feeling good about this season because this season is early. Um, I'm not sweating the season. I'm just kind of like, because ultimately we're gonna get into other people, we're gonna get into other choices, and yeah, if people have heard performances from the group B or C and have their guesses of who people are, let me know in the comments below who you maybe quite possibly think is the banana or the frog or the kitty or the taco or the elephant or the mouse and this and that, all down the line of whoever. Um, because maybe you saw a preview or you saw some uh, clue somewhere about these other characters, and you think that you know who these people are. And then I'll fact check it later and just be like, yeah, sounds reasonable, but I haven't heard them sing yet. Or maybe they have been singing on some video somewhere on YouTube, and now I can consent who they are, and this and that, and whatever and what have you. But I'm gonna get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody.